You're listening to the Lung Lab podcast made possible by the Open Source Imaging Consortium. Here's your host, Elizabeth Estes.
So in this episode, we talk with Dr. Marion Wencker, who is an expert in various rare lung diseases. And in this specific episode, we talk with her about bronchiectasis. When OSIC started, we focused specifically on fibrosing lung diseases and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. But we have moved out and expanded into other diseases, and this is one of those. So Dr. Marion Wencker, who's here, a friend of mine for many years. We've known each other through this lung space, and here at the European Respiratory Society meeting, a lot going on about bronchiectasis this year.
Yes, isn't it exciting?
Where did it come from all of a sudden? We've been talking about it for a few years, and all of a sudden it's like it's exploded onto the scene. People are talking about this disease.
Yes. And many things happened in the background for many years in parallel. And now all the different trajectories sort of meet and bring this almost perfect storm together. There have been incredible activities around patient registries. So that helped clinicians and researchers learn so much more about the disease. Now, with this knowledge and these patients in the registries, you can feed into all the research projects that are going on in pharmaceutical industries. And now, after quite some years of this intense research, we are now at a stage where some of these trials actually show some really relevant, for patient relevant results. So now we are at a stage with bronchiectasis that we were at with IPF about 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had our big OSIC meeting on Saturday, and you were there, and we had a big conversation about are we at bronchiectasis today where we were when we started with the drugs out on the marketplace with IPF? And the answer was, yeah, we're back at the starting line. But we've learned so much in those 10 years. And I think we've done a lot of good things, but we've made a lot of mistakes too. So we can apply that to this disease and hopefully even shorten the time that we get from where we are now to, really drugs that are making a huge difference.
Absolutely, and particularly artificial intelligence will help us to really foster more research and speed up getting answers to some pertinent questions. So that's really an exciting time ahead of us.
So let's talk a little bit about bronchiectasis for those who don't know. It is different from pulmonary fibrosis. Yes. It is a different type of a disease. As a pulmonologist, can you explain a little bit?
Yeah, sure. IPF is a disease that happens in the interstitium, so in the tissue of the lung, whereas bronchiectasis is an inflammatory disease that happens in the airways. So it's more in the air spaces of the lung. So when you there have an inflammation, then of course the body produces mucus and pus. And that's why patients suffer from cough, from purulent sputum production, from breathlessness. So those are the key main symptoms patients have. And what also happens, obviously, when you have a chronic infection in your body, it tires you out. So these patients are fatigued a lot.
And it's weird because those symptoms, coughing and the sputum and fatigue, it mimics a lot of different diseases.
Yes.
I mean, so how do they finally get found out that they have this? And is this a chronic disease? Can it be reversed? I mean, where are we in this space?
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting question. A lot of science going around that. So with regards to how do we detect it? Well, it all starts with a discussion between patient and treating physician, right? So, and we need to teach physicians to think about bronchiectasis more often. So if patients do have productive cough, if they do have purulent sputum, think about bronchiectasis, do the test, do a CT scan, or ask a specialist that knows the disease and can really manage the next steps.
So what are the next steps? So let's say someone says, oh, we've done the HRCT, they've seen it now, they've found it. What are the next steps at this moment? And then, crystal ball, what would they be?
Right. So what you're trying to do is to find the cause of the disease. And there are some causes that are known and can be detected and can be treated, and other causes are unknown. So then you treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
What kind of tools do we have in our toolbox right now? One is you can treat the sputum production with physiotherapy, trying to get rid of the sputum. You can try and treat breathlessness if there's an obstructive component with bronchodilators, for example. If there's an asthmatic component, you can add inhaled corticosteroids like you would do in asthma. And nowadays we also have more and more data, and in the US now the first drug on the market that actually treats the inflammation. Of course, if you find a bug, you can treat it with an antibiotic, but you don't really want to do that long time. So if there are other options like anti-inflammatory treatments that can reduce flare-ups and reduce disease progression, that's a big step forward for these patients.
So you mentioned artificial intelligence, and
Yes.
we care a little bit about that at OSIC, and we have bronchiectasis scans in, and we're bringing more in. Where do you think that can take progress in this disease? How would AI or machine learning be used for bronchiectasis, and in what ways?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think we can only think about bits and pieces of it, and a lot more will be evolving as the tools become sharper.
Yeah.
But for example, one of the things is that many patients get CT scans for all kinds of different reasons.
Right.
So if you would have a hospital system, a CT scan system that tells physician, okay, you have looked at the liver, or you have looked at the heart, or you have looked at ribs, for example. But this is another important finding could be that this patient has bronchiectasis, so please look for that clinically and initiate.
So in other words, so we've spoken with some lung cancer and talking about incidental findings,
Yes.
right? Someone goes in for a broken rib and they find out, hey, wait a minute, this person has lung cancer. But they found that because they happened to see the lung when they were looking at the rib, and they see this, but they know what that looks like. In this case, if you had an algorithm that was built on a whole bunch of data that could show that to the system and call that out, that would be an advance that wouldn't rely necessarily on the radiologist, right? That the machine can help do that from an incidental finding standpoint.
And oftentimes you have to give justice to the radiologists. They answer the questions that you're asking them.
Correct.
So if you're asking for a broken rib, they will answer the question of the broken rib and not necessarily look for anything else. So if you have an algorithm that tells you, okay, there's also something else, that will definitely speed up diagnosis.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking to Dr. Helmut Prosch, who I know you know, who's a brilliant radiologist and then president of Estes, and he was talking about the fact that these were augments to radiologists, not to replace them, or not to, but an augmented tool because it gives them another set of eyes and answers a question that they were never asked, but perhaps is super important from the patient's perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So EMBARC is the big data registry for bronchiectasis, and I know that there are more coming and more people talking about it. And where do you see the drug development world going in the next few years for this? I know there's one, as we talked about, approved in the U.S. Are there more coming? Because it sure seems that way with all the conversations happening on the floor.
Oh, absolutely. There are more products in the pipeline. There are some very exciting new results that have been presented here at this conference. And there will be more studies going on, and there will be choices for patients. And as it always is with new drugs, some patients do tolerate one treatment better than the other. So it's, even though both have their place and you need to have them both, it's always good to have a choice because one patient may react better to one drug than the other.
So with IPF, we're starting to talk about, and with sarcoid too, because OSIC is also working with the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, but we're talking about phenotyping of the disease, right? The phenotyping. Do we get to that point with bronchiectasis, phenotype, put them into these characterizations, and then again, down to this personalized treatment so that we have one treatment that doesn't fit all, but one treatment for each phenotype.
Yes.
Is that where you see this headed?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of discussion going on around that, and you can basically see a stable patient with bronchiectasis, like with the different disease traits, like a Rubik cube, right? And so a stable patient, all the cubes are in the right place.
In the same color.
In the same color, right? And an exacerbated one is just twisted. Yeah. And for one patient, it's twisted right ways, the other one left ways. So when you start treating, then you change the Rubik cube again. And maybe another disease trait becomes more prominent. So you may, after doing the first step, you may have to take a second step to actually turn the Rubik cube back into the right position again.
That is the greatest analog that I've ever heard for a disease, complicated disease, because it's
I did not invent it.
Well, we're going to give you credit on this podcast anyway. So, Dr. Wencker, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and your expertise. And as always, your support of OSIC. We appreciate it big time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Lung Lab podcast from OSIC. Share this episode of the Lung Lab and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. The Lung Lab podcast is produced by Bloodstream Media. Learn more at www.bloodstreammedia.com.